So welcome everyone to our Maundy Thursday worship. This is the night that we remember the last time that Jesus gathered with his intimate followers to share a meal. The meal they were sharing was the traditional Passover Seder, celebrated each year by the Israelite people. So tonight, we're going to celebrate with them as we remember their story and our own story. So as we begin, please join me in our call to worship. Jesus took a bowl and towel and washed the dirt of the day away. We come before you, Divine One, seeking to wash away all that prevents us from following Christ's example. Jesus took a bowl and towel and met the needs of his friends with compassion. We come before you, Divine One, honoring the ties of family and friendship. Jesus took a bowl and towel and shared himself with his disciples. We become before you, Divine One, as part of a community of faith that accepts and shares. Jesus took a bowl and towel and reminded his friends that they were called to serve. We come before you, Divine One, prepared to serve, to seek out and focus and the pattern of our Christian service. Jesus took a bowl and towel and humbled himself. We come before you today, Divine One, in humble worship. Nancy, are you still muted?
Meekness and majesty, manhood and deity, in perfect harmony, man who is God, Lord of eternity, dwells in humanity, kneels in humility, and washes our feet. Oh, what a mystery, meekness and majesty, bow down and worship, for this is your God, this is your God. Father's pure radiance, perfect in innocence, yet learns obedience to death on the cross, suffering to give us life, conquering through sacrifice, and as they crucify, praise Father, forgive. Oh, what a mystery, meekness and majesty, bow down and worship, for this is your God, this is your God. Unsearchable, God the invisible, love indestructible, in frailty appears. Lord, our infinity, Drooping so tenderly, lifts our humanity to the height of his throne. Oh, what a mystery, meekness, majesty, bow down and worship. For this is your God. This is your God. Oh, what a mystery, meekness and majesty, bow down and worship. For this is your God. This is your God. This is your God.
Hear the story of that first Passover as it is recorded in Exodus chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole congregation of the Israelites that on the 10th of this month, they are to take a lamb for each household. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the house in which they eat it. This is how they shall eat it: dressed to travel, your sandals on your feet and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it quickly, for this is the Passover of the Lord. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human and animal. And all the gods of Egypt I will execute my judgment, for I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the house where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance." Hello, my name is Zamora. I am a slave in the household of Annas Madonna. Manus owns many slaves in many houses here in Jerusalem. At this time of year, it is always extremely busy. Many visitors have come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. By the laws of the Torah, each year we must remember the history of our people by celebrating the time the angel of death passed over our houses. And because we obeyed Yahweh by marking the doorposts of our house with the blood of a lamb. Each year we sacrifice a lamb in the temple, and then we share it in a great feast of celebration as we retell the story each year. Of course, I am a slave, and I do not get to enjoy the feast. Most years, I'm confined to the kitchens, preparing the meal for others to enjoy. But this year will be different This year, I have been chosen to serve. This year, I will be in the room with them, remembering right alongside them, remembering and sharing as they recite the stories and share the feast. This year, in my own way, I too will celebrate the Passover. Let us join in our prayer of remembrance. Divine Guide, on this night, the night when Jesus gathered with his disciples, we are called to remember all those whose lives touch and connect with our own lives. We are called to remember the stories of the past, and we are called to honor the stories of others. On this night, the night that Jesus washed his disciples' feet, we are called to remember his example of service and to commit ourselves to follow that example by serving others. On this night, when Jesus shared food and fellowship with his friends, we are called to remember the importance of sharing freely the blessings we have been given. On this night, the night when Jesus commanded his disciples to love each other as he himself loved them, we are called to remember that the same commandment applies to us. Amen. And listen now to the story of that night, as told in the Gospel according to John. Now, before the festival of Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Evil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet then, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who is bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who would betray him. And for this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, he put his robe back on and returned to the table. And he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, has washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. I was chosen to serve in one of the guest houses. I had everything prepared. I was so excited. I waited in the shadows while the guests arrived. There were 13 of them, all men. I waited for them to be seated so I would know who was the most important, because I would serve him first. When it all arrived and settled in, it was clear who the leader was. I was just preparing to go and get the basin and towel so they could wash away the dirt of the journey when the leader stood up. He went over to the basin and took off his cloak. No idea what to do. Should I run in and insist on taking over? This wasn't supposed to happen. But I had no idea what to do, so I did nothing. I just stood back and watched. He knelt down and he washed each of their feet. One man tried to protest, but he wouldn't listen. When he finished, he said to them, I've given you an example to follow. You must serve others the way I have served you. And then he said something really strange. He said, I'm giving you a new commandment. We already have 10. Why would he need a new commandment? But he said, the new commandment is this, that you love one another just the way that I have loved you. Please join me in our prayer of service. Divine servant, we have traveled this long, dusty Lenten journey. Our feet are tired, dirty, aching, and calloused. You have shown us your love by becoming a humble servant. Humble us when we forget that we need your guidance, when we think that we can make our way without you. Humble us when pride steps in and we believe some work is beneath us. Humble us when we are too proud to accept help or care or love from others, fearing that it will make us appear weak. Humble us when we do not fully recognize or open ourselves to receive the gift of your amazing bounty and grace. As Christ humbled himself, teach us humility. As Christ served, teach us to serve. As Christ loved, teach us to love. In his name, we humbly pray. Amen. We continue the story of that night as we read from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 26, verses 26 to 30. While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin. I tell you, I will never drink the fruit of the vine again until the day I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang the hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. Once things settled down a little bit, I started to serve the meal. But my mind was racing. They'd called this man Lord, but I learned his name was Jesus. I did my best to concentrate on my job and make sure that everything was done properly, everything according to the traditions. I knew how important it was. During the Passover meal, I had studied hard and made sure that I knew exactly what was required of me. But I couldn't get Jesus' words out of my head. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. As the meal was coming to an end, Jesus, as was tradition, took the last of the unleavened bread and broke it into pieces and gave it to them. This would be the last thing eaten during evening. But as he handed it to them, he broke with tradition. And instead of reciting the traditional blessing, he said to them, "Take, eat. This is my body." By the looks on their faces, I think his disciples were as confused and revolted as I was. How could he say such a thing? The very idea of eating human flesh is abhorrent. It defies every law and practice of our people. It's completely unthinkable. I knew these men would never do such a thing. After all, they were here to celebrate the most sacred festival of our people. But as I watched, each one took the bread and ate it. After that, Jesus took the last cup of wine and he gave the traditional blessing. But just as the others were preparing to drink, he added, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sin." It was all so surreal. I began to wonder if I had imagined it. It made no sense. And then there was something unexplainable, something so powerful about what he said. and what he had done. It was clear that I was not the only one who felt that way. The room was so silent that I felt like I needed to hold my breath in case anyone heard me breathe. And then slowly, Jesus began to sing the final hymn, the blessing. Tentatively at first, the others began to join in. But there was no sense of joy or celebration in the singing. It was quite somber. Then when they finished, no one spoke. They didn't even look up. When Jesus stood up to leave, they simply stood up and followed in silence. And I was left alone in the silence, trying to understand. Let us join in our prayer of gratitude. Divine love, we recognize in ourselves the strengths and the weaknesses of Jesus' first disciples. Although they loved him, they disappointed and failed him. And yet, gathering with those imperfect friends at the last meal, Jesus washed their feet in service and then extended the bread and the cup to each one. Jesus called them to love one another and invited them to share his very life and to accept with him the road ahead. We are humbled, honored, and inspired by the deep love Christ extended to those first disciples and still extends to us. We take seriously the call to be his disciples today. We offer our deep gratitude for the promise that when we disappoint and fail you, you will love us still. Guide us back to a place of faithfulness. Renew in us the vision to see the world as you see it, so that we might learn to love and serve with joy and gratitude each and every day. Amen. For a long time, I just sat there. I couldn't stop thinking about him. He was so gentle, so kind. And I'll never forget the way he looked at me when I served him. He looked at me like I was a real person, not just a slave. He smiled. He even said thank you. But even in the middle of the meal, at the height of the laughter and celebration, there was somehow a look of deep sadness in his eyes. And when I thought about it, when I thought about what he had said, a shiver went up my spine. I can't tell you how, but I know something terrible is going to happen. And I know that he knew it too. He knew he would soon be dead. But it didn't make any sense. Why would someone so kind, so gentle, so special have to die? I just couldn't make any sense of it. Is there any sense? Is there any reason? Is there any hope?
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shadows gather deep and cold, lamplight flickers, fades and fails. Lord, you know what daybreak holds, thorns and beating, rocks and tales. Who will be denied, betrayed, when the rooster wakes the sun? Yet to kneel alone and pray, not my will, but thine be done. In the waters of the night, in power when darkness reigns, in the grief that has no light, in the time of fear and pain, then behold fast to your way, to the victory you have won. Jesus, teach us how to pray. Not my will, but thine be done.
And now we are called out from this time of worship. May the blessing of God, who called the people out of Egypt, call us out of our comfort and safety to embark on a journey of challenge and risk. May the blessing of Christ, who kneels and washes our feet, call us out from our comfort and safety to embrace and serve those we meet on the journey. May the blessing of the Spirit, who leads us on to dream new hope, new possibilities, and new life, call us out of our comfort and safety to live fully within the blessing, the grace, and love of the divine. And so we go out from this time of worship. Let us go with God. Amen.